Welcome to the Cold Brew and Cream podcast, where storytelling meets personal growth. All right. Welcome to the Cold Brew and Cream podcast. I am your host, Jeffrey Baguma. Today we have two very special guests on. We have the one and only Mathematics, and you brought your daughter today. Can you introduce her?
So that's Sky Layton Rebellion.
Nice to
That's
meet
my
you.
daughter.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
This is a first. All right. So let's open up. I'll open up with this. Some people survive pain, and some people also transform it into purpose. Today's guest survived addiction, prison, overdoses, violence, and a lifestyle that nearly buried him permanently. 15 winters, 14 summers behind prison walls, 131 detoxes, 7 ODs. But somehow, through all of that darkness, he found light. He turned pain into purpose. Now he spends his life trying to save others from becoming the person he once was. Today on the Cold Brew and Cream podcast, we sit down with a man known as Mathematics, or Math. And beside him is one of his greatest symbols of his transformation. His daughter, Sky. Welcome. This episode is about redemption, fatherhood, addiction, hope, legacy, and what happens when a man decides his story will no longer end in destruction. Mathematics and Sky, you are very welcome to the show. All our audience, you're about to get a great story, and a motivational story at that. But before we begin, Math, how do you take your coffee?
French vanilla, depending on where I am, oat milk or cream. And it used to be 2 sugars, but I'm trying to, pre-diabetic, so I only go with 1 sugar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Yes.
Sky, do you have a beverage of choice, like a nutritious drink, a soda, something that you like to have, maybe at the school or during the weekend?
I like to make my own drink. I mix Hawaiian Punch and Sprite, then I add blue candy sharks and whipped cream on the top.
Okay, I'm going to have to copy and paste that. Very good. All right, here we are. Okay, we're going to be doing a little time traveling today. Okay, most of our time we're going to spend in the past. Then we're going to take a visit to the present time. And then we're going to take a visit to the future.
Okay. Let's do it.
All right. So, Math, before the streets, who were you as a little boy?
Basically, I was someone that was always trying to somehow escape how I was feeling. I was respectful, but I was also very mischievous. I basically put on a lot of fronts, but I was always kind of like follower mode versus leader mode. I wanted to do what everybody else was doing, class clown, but also in Angels Without Wings. Was also respectful, but was also disrespectful. And I found myself to be very mischievous and always wanting to be kind of with the cool kids and doing what the cool kids were doing and misbehaving in school. But I did know the difference between right from wrong. But I wasn't always in a position to do right. I found myself more feeling comfort in doing wrong.
Okay. Did you feel like your home was full of love? Did you feel loved as a little boy?
Yes. My mother was very good at loving me. I think that was one of my first traumas, is my mother overloved me and didn't really keep me accountable. And some of it might have been parenting from guilt because, she felt as though it was better to leave my real father. And she told me another gentleman was my father. So at the time, I didn't know this, but my mother did her very best, but she had to work a lot of hours. She was a provider. So, single, when you grow up without your father, a lot of us end up incarcerated, or we end up 85% of people that grow up without a father, a real father that's there and present, end up on also drugs and alcohol. So my mother did her best, but she also had to do a lot of things alone. So there became a point in my aging process that she could no longer kind of do it on her own, because I started getting a little bit to be too much.
Okay. Now, let's keep it back right there in the beginning. While you're still young, before things start to make a turn, you do feel that there is love in the home, and you are loved. Take us back. What's your favorite, one of your most favorite childhood memories that when you think back on, you still get a little grin or smile today?
The Christmases and the Thanksgivings that we had. I grew up with aunt and uncle and 3 cousins across the street. I had my mother's brother, Uncle Bob, downstairs. I had my grandmother upstairs. And we had like big Christmases, Thanksgivings. We would go to lakes in Greenfield and pools in the summertime. So it was really like the family Soldiers Field Road in Brighton. We would go over there to we'd have the MDC pool in North Cambridge by MDC. So there was a lot of like family activities and stuff like that we would do that I can remember. But really the Christmases and the Thanksgivings and spending, hide and go seek and hanging out with my cousins, or my mother would play cards on the weekend. So all the kids would be in the room while the parents were out there playing kitty whisk and doing playing rummy and whisk and whatever they were doing out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds positive.
Yeah, it was good. My mother, had me in Shoot Straight. I was a Cub Scout. I was a Boy Scout. I was in this choir called Angels Without Wings at St. Paul's AME Church in Cambridge. My mother had me in Montessori school, Peabody School. I went to after-school programs. So there was a lot of positive things. My mother did everything possible to try to get me into these character-building activities and character-building sports. I played Little League Baseball. There was a few other things. I always had Huffy bikes. I grew up around Fresh Pond in Cambridge, so riding around the pond, which was like 4 or 5 miles, go sledding down there in the summertime. So definitely it was a good experience. But this this addiction piece that I have, it doesn't really care about what's going on the outside. It matters what's going on the inside.
Okay. So from the outside looking into your story and what you're telling us, do you feel like you, at least in that moment in time, had a much better upbringing than a lot of other kids?
Yeah. Yes, I definitely, even when I met my real father at about 11 years old, he was a millionaire and he owned a big construction company. So I was driving I was jackhammering by 12 years old. I was driving equipment by 10 or 11 and a half year olds, just in the yard and stuff like that, big machines and stuff. So I was exposed to a lot. I was exposed to work early. I was exposed to work accountability, working on a crew. I also went to Upward Bound and Shoe Straight camp. That was overnight, so my mother exposed me to camp. There was some fear with that because I had bedwetting issues growing up. So it used to make it difficult to spend the night and go to camp and stuff, and that was a lot of insecurity that I had growing up because it was, I peed the bed till I was about 13. So that created a lot of discomfort, spending the night over people's houses, going to camp, spending the night overnight at Cub Scout, Boy Scout camp, because there was always that fear of was I going to go over there and people were going to find out that, I was a big kid but still peeing the bed.
Okay.
I never talked about that before on the podcast. So it's bringing out new stuff. Yeah.
So, so even with all this love and support surrounding you, and your access to great things, there still came a time when things started turning the complete opposite way.
Yes.
Right. And there was a lure. Right. What started pulling you away from such a loving, supportive household towards the streets or to the complete opposite of who you were at that time?
I mean, even though I was growing up and exposed in a loving environment, I know now that when children see their loved ones doing particular things, they tell themselves that it must be okay. So even though it was a loving environment, I did see like alcohol drinking growing up. I did see people smoking cigarettes. I did see people smoking reefer and stuff like that. So as my mother, she was raised, really getting into some important levels at her job, she would come home at 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, 7:30 at night. And when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, that was 10, 11, 12, maybe, that was okay. But then around 12, late 12, early 13, I started getting into mischief. NWA had just came out. Gangster rap music had just come out. I started hanging out with kids that had older brothers and sisters that were like 14, 15, 16, 17, or their sisters had boyfriends. And so then I was starting to see kids that were drinking, kids that were smoking, kids that were doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And so that started looking attractive to me. And anything that was going to make me look cool and anything that was going to allow me to fit in, those are always the things that I wanted to do. My mother tried to get me into karate, but that wasn't flashy. I've always been in love with the flash. Anything that was flash and brought me instant gratification. And, video games did it for a while. I was around for Odyssey, then that transitioned into Atari and ColecoVision. But then there came a time when there was some other things that the big kids were doing that I wanted to do, and there was just no influence there.
Talking about those kids, are the big kids who were surrounding you or in that same environment as you were, do you mind talking about what they were doing?
Well, I would be at the park like normal kids do, and there'd be some kids riding their bikes. There'd be other kids playing maybe a pickup game of baseball, but then there'd be other kids on the basketball court. But then there'd be other kids that would be like smoking cigarettes, and then there'd be other kids that were smoking something that looked like they were smoking cigarettes, but it smelled different. And so I kind of blended in. In the beginning, it started off with me being those kids that were running the bases, playing kickball. Then it transitioned to like playing basketball, and then it transitioned into me wanting to do what the other kids that were doing. First with the cigarettes, and then with the seeing the marijuana being smoked. And so that's when I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing it, but I'm definitely there's a passive learners and there's active learners, and a passive learner learns from like other people's mistakes, and they can say, oh, that's what's going to happen if I do that. They kind of listen to their parents. I'm an active learner where I have to learn through personal experience.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm willing to try. I'm a risk taker.
Now, you got in because of the excitement.
Yes.
Because of the flash.
Yes.
Now, once you found yourself center stage, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever feel like, uh-oh, I'm trapped? There's no way out of this, right? I have to keep going. Is that something that came to mind?
Yeah, so at 13, I got exposed to everything. Was for the first time, my first experience with a young lady, dealing drugs, cigarettes, drinking, and then smoking marijuana for the first time. And so I've always suffered from like low self-esteem, low self-worth. My father was a good guy, and they were just playing around, but they would always make fun of me that I wasn't tall enough, or I was too chubby, or they'd make fun of me because like I had a big butt and stuff. And so they didn't have body image labels back in the 70s and in the early 80s, and they didn't have body shaming like they do now. Even though there's bullying that goes on in school, I feel as though that there's also parenting bullying, where you constantly pick on your kids' defects of character or areas where your kids fall short, and you're always bringing that to them. And so I had a lot of that coming from my father's side of the family, where there was like expectations for me to be a certain height. There was expectations athletically. There was expectations that they wanted on the baseball field. So I was never really praised for like what I could do well. I was always praised for what they wanted me to do, and because I wasn't good at those things. So because I had a lot of insecurities when I first did that first substance, cigarettes, the weed, the drinking, the girls, those all became my way to escape my reality of how I felt growing up and how I felt in life.
Okay. So you're stuck in this new reality. Actually, did you ever feel like you lost who you really were? Like you were somebody completely different? Or was the lore of what you were doing the new normal and you felt comfortable with it at that point?
I don't really think I ever had an identity. I think my whole life, I was trying to search. I got a song out that now QMS called "I Was Lost, Now I'm Found." I felt like the bulk of my life I was lost. I was living a lie identity, and I never really had an identity. And so, I do know that once I put that substance into my body, that was my mental obsession 90% of the time. Like everything was centered around we have to do the bad things in order to feel good. Everything was always enhanced and felt better. Like none of the stuff, the kick the can was no longer valuable. Playing basketball was no longer an interest. Studying in school wasn't an interest. Everything now revolved around doing those things, still like dancing, trying to have fun, but it always had to be done with a substance. So the bulk of my life was living a lie identity, and it was a journey for me to go from a lie identity to having now an identity.
Okay. Speaking of this identity, did this identity have a shelf life? Meaning, did you see yourself continuing in this path and living long?
I would say, I didn't know, but the lie identity had levels to it. And so there was a lie identity selling marijuana. There was a different lie identity selling cocaine. There was a different lie identity when I started kind of getting into like being 20, 30 deep. We had a little gang. So each level of lie identity that I was living had a different level. Then once you start, when you bring the arrest in, there's a total different lie identity that you have in county jail. Then there's another lie identity you have in state prison. So the lie identity just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so life is really about it's easier to learn the right way than it is to unlearn the wrong way. And that's why it took me 15 winters, 14 summers, 131 detox days, 8 holdings, 4 halfway houses, because all these behaviors and lie identity have been embedded in me since I was 13. It was hard to reverse that behavior when I just didn't have the tools to do it. Punishment doesn't solve the problem. Treatment, awareness, and accountability solves the problem. But when you just lock someone up, that doesn't really solve the problem. That's just like masking the problem, similar to like medicines. There's certain medicines and certain ways to solve an illness, and then there's one to just treat it, which just means it never gets cured, we just treat it.
Very good. I'm going to skip the next. Let me ask the next question here. Let me not skip anything. So you're on the street, right? We're still in that time frame. You're dabbling in a little this, a little of that. You're living a life that's not truly yours. You just haven't figured it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming, though. What was one of the most dangerous situations you came across living that life, keeping a PG-13, and still just carried on and continued doing what you had been doing?
I was put in a position where there was a firearm involved, and if I would have, pulled the trigger, I might could be doing life in prison. And so, for some reason I didn't, and that was kind of like a moment where I feel as though I didn't know then, but the universe was aligning me saying, nah, we have a purpose. He's going to go through some stuff, but we're not going to put him in a position where he can't ever come home to do something different and have the redemption story. Because sometimes it only takes 20 seconds to 30 seconds to 40 seconds to 60 seconds to make a decision that can cost you the rest of your life in prison. So that's why now one of my mottos is, like, people that play chess and take 7 seconds to think about their move win more than people that don't. And so if I didn't think about that move, I might not be sitting here doing this podcast now. So that was like a turner moment for me, where if I would have made that decision to get involved in that type of situation, it could have been a completely different outcome. And then about a year later, I went upstate for the first time and was exposed to people doing natural life, which means you're never coming home. People doing second degree, which means you might have to do 15 to 20 to 25 years before you can come home and then and then be on parole for the rest of your life. So that was an eye-opening experience for me to be exposed to my first roommate. I walked in and he had been in prison 17 years, and he had been there since he was 16 years old for taking someone's life at 16 from a bad decision. So for me, that was probably one of the moments where I was like, I'm glad I got through that and made the right choice.
Well, I'm definitely glad you made the right choice. I
Yes.
know there's a lot of people who were very happy that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, so you survived, 7 overdoses, went through 131 detoxes. Now, some people listening right now can relate,
Mm-hmm.
but most people can't even imagine the pain.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening inside you during this time?
There was a lot of internal conflict because I was trying to I've always been wanting to present, like I talked about my TED Talk, as Gucci on the outside, but came out on the inside. So I've always been in an internal conflict with myself. There's one person my spirit wants to do the right thing, and then there's another person inside of me that says, well, if we do the right thing, then Joe and Tom and her and him aren't gonna like you. So it's always been conforming to do. I'd rather inconvenience myself, and this is why I've been a professional people pleaser, because I'd rather inconvenience myself to get others to like me than do the right thing and not care who likes me in that process. And so that's just coming from low self-esteem. And so if you're exhibiting confidence with no self-esteem, that's false pride, and I've always lived with false pride. But now I have self-esteem and I exhibit confidence, but the confidence is real because I do esteemable acts in order to be confident. It's just not based off of ego, where I'm telling myself I'm the great I am, or I'm this or that. I actually put in the work to have the confidence.
Okay. I just can't. You got me wrapped in this story, in this journey, in your life story. I'm thinking everything that's going on, it's a perfect storm, so to speak,
Yes.
that you're experiencing. Now, this podcast is not about me. It's about you. It's about Sky. But listening to your answers, I'm thinking about, if I was part of that type of lifestyle, and there was any sort of violence surrounding me or anything like that, or people who you don't associate with right now, on a, maybe, I don't know if it's a spiritual level, on a personal, did you ever feel a sense of guilt from actions that may have taken place or that took place while you were still part of a gang or part of a group?
Yeah, because I still have a conscience, and I'm overall a good guy that just makes bad decisions. And so, I've sold drugs to people that didn't deserve it, but maybe being with a bunch of guys, and then we start picking on somebody that we shouldn't be picking on. And so, there's been, and even like through my addiction, I've had situations with young ladies that started doing the same drugs that I was doing, and they're no longer with us because they overdose. So a lot of times people will ask, Math, why do you go so hard? Because I know that there's like 2 young ladies that were exposed to using a substance that we were both started using together, and they overdosed, and now their kids don't have their mother. And so that's why now I go so hard on this journey, because a lot of times what happens is with, men overdose way more than women because we use by ourselves and women use with people. But a lot of times young ladies, this is why I try to educate my daughters so much, if they see their boyfriend or the person they love or their older brother or their older sister doing something, then they start to do it too. So for me, the guilt too comes from the people that I sold drugs to not being informed about addiction, girlfriends that might have started to do ecstasy or something like that, or we were doing cocaine, or we were doing a hard substance, and I didn't know that they were going to end up addicted like me. It's just, we thought it was going to be fun, but then it turned into full-blown alcoholism and addiction, because it goes like HFA, high functioning addict, high functioning alcoholic, then it goes into functioning addict, functioning alcoholic, and then in the end you just get the active alcoholic or an addict. Some people have this allergy, some people don't. And so when you participate and party with somebody and then they end up overdosing or losing their life, or sometimes there can be, I remember I sold something to a friend, and then he went and committed a crime to get more, and then ended up getting 15 to 20 years. Like then I saw him when we were incarcerated, and he kind of said to me, Math, if I never came and saw you that night, would I be sitting here doing this 15 to 20? That was a lot of guilt that I had to look at.
Okay. Now, I believe in everybody's family, mm-hmm. whether sibling, cousin, you can go further down the line. There are people that are suffering, that are addicted, mm-hmm. that have the allergy,
yes,
like you had, right? And not all of them are surrounded with people who understand this, who are less recipient to taking time with them, doing research on their own, so to speak, mm-hmm. and trying to trying to help them out in more of an indirect way. For those people, what would you say to those people who believe that addiction is simply a lack of willpower?
I mean, it's a disease. Like, I didn't make a decision to put a substance before my child. I didn't make a decision. I didn't wake up and say that I wanted to spend the bulk of my life incarcerated or to experience overdose and all the other horrors, being on mass SAF for 3 years and that humiliation. What is a choice is the recovery is a choice. So that's where the choice comes in, but I have an allergy. It's just like someone that's allergic to peanuts. That's not a choice that they make to be allergic to peanuts. Someone that's allergic to shellfish, they didn't make a choice to be allergic to shellfish. Or someone that's allergic to bees, right? They didn't make a choice to be allergic to bees, but they have compassion for those people. Any other illness has compassion, mm-hmm. but when it comes to alcohol and drugs, people feel as though that it's a choice, but it's not a choice. It's actually a disease, and that's why now the government will pay while you go into treatment. That's why they have treatment centers. They have FMLA where you can't lose your job for 4 months while you go get help. They have PMFLA where you can get 70% of your paycheck while you go and get help. But so this isn't just, it's just not a choice. It's actually a disease that we have. And in most cases, I really believe it's a genetic disposition that, comes down. And what happens is there's 1 out of 15 people in the world where we process a substance, alcohol, drugs, any mind-altering substance, even if it's prescribed by a doctor, we process it different than other people. And so other people might say, I'm just going to have 1 beer and it's done. Once I put 1 beer in my system, I automatically want more. And so that's just kind of like how it is. But it's so you have to. My mother was misinformed and wasn't educated, and then she went to Al-Anon. So there's a lot of resources right now to educate the family members where they can learn about how this disease works. And so if you know what the problem is, then you respect the solution. But a lot of families don't understand alcohol and addiction. This is why they don't respect the solution. So if you want to support your family member, there's tons of resources out there that can also educate, and they have supports out there for the family members as well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that. Yeah, piggybacking on that, when I do come across people who are struggling, of recent, while looking at them, I try to imagine them as a little kid, and ask myself the question, and then reply and understand that person at 5, 6, 7, whatever, 10 years old, didn't, wish upon a star that they could be struggling with something,
Yes.
with an addiction.
Well, my boy Jody, he just did a TED Talk that was powerful. And inside of his TED Talk, he said, rather than saying to people what's wrong with you, we should focus on what happened to you, which you just brought up. And if we can focus on what happened to the person, that's compassion. And then we can be empathetic and compassionate while they're on their journey to recovery. So that's really the mindset shift, or the perception shift, is if we can stop looking at people and saying what's wrong with you to the kids in school, what's wrong with you to the kids in high school, what's wrong with you to the people with alcoholism and addiction and going to prison, and really focus on what happened to you. And then if we can focus on what happened to you, then that's when the healing journey starts. When we focus on what's wrong with you, that just leads to more punishment, more consequences. But consequences and punishment doesn't equal. I was incarcerated my whole life. That the punishment, it's when I started getting on a treatment and a healing journey that things begin to change.
Okay. So 15 winters and 14 summers in prison. What does that environment do to a person psychologically? Who does that person start to become behind the prison walls?
It's really like, a lot of people say prison's a bad place, but there's some great people that came. Martin Luther King went to prison. Malcolm X went to prison. Nelson Mandela went to prison. I went to prison. And so it's all your mentality when you get there. It's, if you go there and you get into the gambling and the drugs and the gang violence and stuff, and you do like a rough bid, it's going to be more of a punishment. But if you go there and use that structure and that time to figure out who you are, then like I always tell people that the first letter in prison is P, because you can't go to prison and find your purpose. So it's definitely, there's levels to it. There's maximum, there's minimum, there's lower security, there's pre-release. And depending on the level you're in, if you're very respectful, you can do what they call a smooth bid, meaning that like you kind of just do your time, and there's going to be that mental and that emotional internal conflict because you're locked up, you're incarcerated, you're getting stripped after visits, you're missing. That's 15 birthdays I missed, 15 Mother's Days, 15 Christmases. The bulk of my children's births I've missed. I saw my first child from behind the wall. So there's all that emotional and mental stuff. But as far as your experience while incarcerated and being in the system, that's going to be based off the choices. If you choose to, like the kids call it, crash out, there's a lot of COs that are going to be there to restrain you if you crash out. Like some people like to do their incarceration like that. I'm more of a guy that likes to go in and kind of do a smooth bid and do things the way that I'm, follow what I'm supposed to do. The problem is I could never follow that same structure when I left. And so that's what they call like a treatment all-star or a prison all-star, where you know how to navigate the system to do a smooth bid, but then for some reason, as soon as we walk out of that structure, we tend to fall apart, no follow through.
Okay. So you spent a lot of time. I mean, like you said, you understood the environment inside of prison. You knew how to navigate, but returned.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously there was a moment when that stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that moment when you finally said, I want a better life? And what was that moment or moments which finally broke the cycle?
There was two. One was at 44 years old. I went to prison. I've made multiple bails before, 10,000, 5,000. I think one time I made 15,000. But I went to jail at 44, and I was in Nashua Street and couldn't even make a $300 bail. And then the other reality check was Sky wasn't born yet. I was at her mother's house, and my indictment papers came in, and I was being charged with a habitual criminal. And there was all these stamps from Superior Court basically saying that now I have to face two charges. One is the charges that I got arrested for. The second is the habitual criminal. And so a charge that I should have probably got probation for, they wanted to give me a 10 to 12 or a 12 to 14. And that was a eye-opening experience for me. Like, to get a 10 to 12 or a 12 to 14 at 44 years old, that's a long bit. When you're young, you can knock out that time like that. And they got truth and sentencing now, where you have to do the bulk of your time. It's hard to earn good time. So being a habitual criminal now, and seeing that there was a possibility that if I picked up a particular crime that I could die in prison. And I had almost a fatal overdose a couple times, where one time I was dead for 2 minutes, and another time I could have, right in front of Sky's house, someone was trying to leave me on a bench. And I was explaining that to Sky the other day, because I definitely are transparent with my children, because when they're young, it's prevention, but when they get into high school, it's correction. So I try to expose her to the realities now, because they already know it from TikTok. They already know what's going on in the world. So I'd rather, have that in her head. Hey, my father said that this might happen. But the near-death experiences and the habitual criminal, and the judge that sentenced me said, I'm going to drop the habitual and give you your smallest incarceration ever. But he said, you just got to make a promise to go home and educate people so that they're not. He said, you're articulate, you speak well. And so far, I've kept, that Nashua Street, that Boston Superior Judge, I've kept my promise. And so my Paul Conley was my lawyer. He was a lawyer. He was my lawyer. He told me go home to this place, Wamari Entry, where his wife was the director. And I went to her, and at first I told him, he's crazy. I'm going to go home and do what I want to do. And I actually went to the program. So it was like a full circle experience that my lawyer got me my smallest incarceration ever. And then he also gave me directions to go to further treatment. And then his wife was actually the one that was running the program. And so going to further treatment, and that was like something that I never thought that I would do, but it actually put me in a position to start making better choices and start living in the solution versus the problem.
Very good. And that at that point, I bet there were a lot of people on the sideline who knew you, even ones that you did not know knew you, waiting for you to sink like the Titanic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But like the song says, but you rose like a phoenix instead.
Mm-hmm.
How did you begin rebuilding yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually, and what habits did you implement into your life?
So I started while I was incarcerated with doing a lot of writing. I was exposed to yoga while in Walpole State Prison. Shout out to Jeezy. Jeezy had 3 natural life sentences, and I used to ask him, was he able to keep his mentality up and his energy and a good mindset? And he said, meet me in the yard tomorrow, and he introduced me to yoga. So I have a 3-fold disease, body, mind, and spirit, and I started working on those things, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and emotional. And I did the drug program for the first time, and I started journaling every day, reading every day, because my motto is if you read 10 pages out of a book a day, that keeps the mental ignorance away. That's 3,650 pages of information a year. So I was reading all the time, working out, doing yoga, being, out. Everybody else was smoking cigarettes. I was saying no. Everybody else was smoking K2. I was saying no. Everybody else was sniffing Suboxone, and I was saying no. Everybody else was on the poker table, because I know now that the number one is an odd number. So if you want to be the number one version of yourself, you have to do something odd and different than what everybody else is doing and what you normally do. And because I was that oddball, it looked like I was the cornball. But I got more respect saying no to that stuff than normally when I give in, because I was finally figured out how to stand out versus how to fit in. And there was a lot of guys that wanted to just stand out like I was doing, but they were too worried about what their boys did. And that's what I try to teach her now. Like, don't go to school because everybody else is wearing green socks. Why don't you wear orange and let them follow you versus wearing the green socks that everybody else is wearing?
Right. You have to get away from that group.
Yeah.
You have to get away from that lifestyle. You have to get out of the boat so you can walk on water.
Exactly.
So you could create Motivated by Math.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the birth of Motivated by Math.
So I came home when I was in they used to call me Divine. So my idol's Malcolm X, and he went from Malcolm Little to Detroit Red when he was in the negative, to Malcolm X while he was incarcerated, and then when he went to do his Hajj in Mecca, in Mecca, he saw that there was white and black Muslims, and he became an Orthodox Muslim, and he ended up passing away as Malik al-Shabazz. Well, I went from Daniel R. to Dawood, Orthodox Islam, to Divine, and then mathematics. So it's always been about reinventing yourself. So I reinvented myself. I came out of my cell one time in Plymouth House of Correction. I told the guys, I'm not Divine anymore. I'm going to have a funeral for the old me and give birth to a new me. So I can rebirth myself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So mentally, I'm coming to you as mathematics. Emotionally, spiritually, I'm coming to you as mathematics. And even now, taking care of myself physically more, I'm a different individual because I don't put substances in my body. I don't drink, I don't smoke cigarettes. And so that's how it all started. And then I came home and I just started the MBM movement. MBM can stand for Metaphors by Mathematics, Mentoring by Mathematics, Motivation by Mathematics, Music by Mathematics. And that's just what I came home from, I did. So now it's like mathematics in the MBM family. So it's not just me, it's also a family, because I know that the acronym for team is together, everyone achieves more. And when if you want to get someplace quick, travel alone. But if you want to get someplace far, you got to travel together.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you turned your pain into saving people.
Yes.
How has it felt like to speak at schools, recovery centers, prisons, city halls?
It's good because it's an esteemable act. So, and that's why I always had low self-esteem, because I was never doing esteemable acts. My acts were always based off of how it could be beneficial to me. But esteemable acts are things that I still do for me, but they also benefit others. And so it's given me a purpose. Like, first you have to find your purpose. I found it through speaking and being a creator, and I'm also a safe space creator. Then you have to cultivate your purpose. I've been doing that for years, cultivating my craft. Then you have to see how it can be beneficial to other people. And then the last thing I do is I see if I can get monetary value for my purpose. Then I can actually do it full time. So it's been a really good journey. And then, like, to go do a school and have her come home and say, Daddy, the kids said that you spoke. And to go into a prison, I spoke in a prison the other day, and the lady, the next day, that she was like, there was actually, people that were crying and came up the next day that said that your story really inspired them. So I just wish that when I was younger, when I was incarcerated, when I was in treatment, when I was practicing deadbeat dadism, that there was a mathematics that could motivate and inspire me. So I'm just trying to create, and I'm not a role model, because a role is what I played in the street. I'm actually a power of example, an example of like transformation, an example of going from a baby daddy to a full-time father, and an example of like what recovery can really look like if you put in the work.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
And your past has ultimately become your classroom.
Yes. So, yeah, exactly.
Sky, I don't want to keep you out of this. I'm very happy that your dad wanted you to join us today. That took a lot. He said he wanted you to hear it from him. This is something that he's not shying away from. and he wants to be able to teach not just everybody in this room, but everybody listening, everybody who's going to be watching, and so on. That takes a lot. It takes a lot to really be that transparent, that open, that vulnerable to everybody, right? He must have a fire burning inside him that's led by purpose. Sky, what tell us something about your dad that makes you proud.
Something that makes me proud about my dad is that, like, he, like, helps people, and say if, like, someone's homeless, I'll beg him to give me money so I can give it to the homeless person, even if he doesn't have money. Like, maybe, like, we can, like, he helps people.
Okay. And while he's helping people, is he teaching you, like, lessons about life?
Yeah, because, like, I see what he's doing so I can follow it when I'm older, or even when I'm my age now.
Very good. When people are talking about your dad and talking about all the great things that he's doing for others, how does that make you feel?
Makes me feel good.
Very good. And one last thing. What's your favorite, absolute favorite, or top 3 favorite thing about your father?
My favorite thing about my father is that, like, he hangs out with me and he just doesn't put, like, his music first, his friends first, his somewhat friend first. He, like, always puts his kids and family first before, like, his music, his job. Like, sometimes, like, if he's out somewhere, then he'll, like, do, like, his job, like, for, like, community work like this, but he doesn't put, like, anything before his kids and family.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that about your dad, and thank you for sharing your dad with us.
You're welcome.
So, Math, what do you think your children see when they look at you today? I think she just explained it, but from your eyes.
I think that they see a gentleman that still needs. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But my goal is not to be perfect. My goal is to develop and make progress. But I think that it can be difficult for my older children, because with your children you get do better, but with your grandkids you get do overs. So my older children are probably happy that they see how I am with Sky and with her younger sister Summer, but they also might say, how come he wasn't like that with us? So it can be somewhat of a touchy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I wasn't making all the best decisions. I do have a lot of children, so sometimes I'm spread a little bit thin. But I know that they're proud. I know that they embrace the transformation, and they know that I'm putting in the work. And like Sky said, they know that I do my best. But I do have a little bit of older children parenting guilt, where I feel as though when they see me, all the stuff that I do now with Sky and my other children, my younger children, they might say, where was that gentleman? Where was that father? But I had to take the Nurturing Fathers program. I was a baby daddy, and there's a journey, a bridge you have to cross from being a baby daddy to actually being a father. And so I knew how to make a child, I knew how to be there, but I didn't know how to be present. And that's the difference now, where, like, I know how to be present. I don't do it perfectly all the time with my younger kids. I'm Sky's full-time dad, so I'm not perfect all the time, but I will catch myself and say, you know what, you're doing too much of your stuff. That's why I said that I have to figure out the balance of, like, and that's what recovery is about, balance. And so I just realized now that, like, I'm not going to be perfect, but I do make sure that I get together with my kids. I'm going to my granddaughter's play. She goes to Shady Hill. She has a play this Saturday. I got Sky in her activities. She's in orchestra in Norwood Schools. She takes karate at the Field Martial Arts Academy. She's an orange belt. She just got her first stripe. And
congratulations.
So,
Thank you.
Because what I was doing, I was dragging her to all my events, but I didn't have her in a position to build her self-esteem. Someone brought that to my attention. And so she was in a shell. And then ever since she's been doing the karate, the orchestra, man, she's starting to blossom now.
Awesome.
Yeah. But it's good, but I also know that, like, sometimes my children might say that, you know, where was he at when we were a child? But fatherhood's an ongoing process, and I feel like, you know, you learn more. I know in the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, they said that the average man doesn't mature until the ages of 40 to 60. Well, I got it at 45. And taking that Nurturing Fathers program, and I'm an ambassador for them now, and I do a lot of stuff. I'm doing a Fathers Conference next week for the Department of Public Health, and I'm doing a Fathers Conference June 5th at the Family Nurturing Center. And so I'm like a face now, not just for fathers in general, but especially for fathers in reentry and fathers in recovery. And to be able to work with these professionals and directors and clinicians and psychologists and be able to present information and be asked. I was a keynote speaker for the Fatherhood Conference in Worcester now, and you're looking at a deadbeat dad the bulk of his life. Back child support, no license because of child support, a lot of baby mama drama, but you know, I actually now know how to co-parent, and I actually now know how to be a father that's present in there. Not perfectly, but definitely making progress. I'm going to be a better father tomorrow on May 13th than I was today on May 12th. That's just my goal.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For the kids or younger folk that may get a chance to watch this or hear this, what's a message that you would like to send them that maybe society isn't telling them?
To just do your best to stand out and to be who you are, and to just play the whole tape and think your decisions and your choices through. And normally, you know, everything now is instant gratification. You know, loves and likes off of social media, instant gratification with DoorDash, instant gratification with Amazon. The slow process, the long way, is the shortcut in life. And that's why I wish someone told me, if it's hard and you have to work for it, that usually means it's good. And if it comes easy, that normally means it might come with a consequence. My father had a motto: if it tastes good, it's no good. And I kind of feel like that's what happened to me. Like, the things that I didn't want to do, that was like the vegetables in life, those were actually the best thing for me. And all the things that I wanted to do that were like the cookies and the ice cream and the sugar, and taste good and felt good, and I found out over time that those weren't good for me. So do the things that you don't want to do, so then that opens up the door for you to be able to do the things that you do want to do. If you don't want to clean your room, clean it. Your parents are probably going to let you do what you want to do. If you don't want to go to college and study, do it. Then you can travel, have money, buy a house, do the things you do want to do. But so many times we avoid the tough stuff. But, you know, we need to come together and do the tough things versus doing the easy things. And everybody wants to stand up for the easy stuff, but we need to make a stand and do the tough stuff.
Awesome. All right. What about on the flip side of that coin with parents that are watching, listening? Maybe parents who aren't necessarily dealing with a child who's breaking the rules just yet, but they could, you know, see that the power of hormones, you know, starting to take effect, and even parents who are dealing with children who have a, you know, I learned a new word from you, identity crisis going on right now.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
To try to parent from a place of purpose versus parenting from a place of guilt. And so one of the things that I tell Sky is I'm a teacher from 0 to 7. I'm a coach from 7 to 13. Then I'm a mentor from 13 to 21. And then I can become your friend when you move out my house. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
So just one of the things is just like making sure that we are being a friend, and like as far as like through the communication and leaving that line of communication and letting our children express themselves. but also holding them accountable and just making them aware. It's like if there's something you don't want to let your children be exposed to, that's probably something that they probably need to know, because there's a lot going on in this world, and I just know that sometimes we sugarcoat things or we try to act like things don't exist, and so sometimes we end up finding out that what we were trying to hide from our child, they're already getting into it. And just really this, I know there's this guy, Ed Milet, he's a motivational speaker, and he says what he does is he leaves his phone in the car for an hour when he comes home, and he does a 15-minute check-in with his children every day. And so in that 15-minute check-in is kind of like a good way for you to keep this bond and this communication with your child. Like Sky does a gratitude list. We have a daddy-daughter journal that we don't do all the time, but we do it a lot, where she can kind of put down how she's feeling, I can put down how I'm feeling, ways to improve. There's like certain things that we just do to just stay connected, but really just trying to like make sure that your children are journaling and expressing how they feel, because if we don't give them outlets to express how they feel, then they're going to find outlets through substances, being in toxic relationships, getting with the wrong men, or getting with the wrong young ladies that might fill the void, because daddy issues are real and mommy issues are real. 70% of people that end up growing up without a dad or without a father that's present end up incarcerated, and 85% end up on drugs and alcohol. So that parenting piece, most of the time when you're in an AA and an NA meeting, the upbringing and the relationships with mom and dad had an effect on the child making a choice to put the substance in their body. So, and not, some people don't have a child that has these issues, but they might not be there mentally and supportively, emotionally supportive. Are we going to their games? Are we cheering them on? Are we taking time to make sure that they're in sports and activities that can build their character and build morale within them as well is very important as well.
Excellent. Before I go into a closing message, do you have anything going on? What's next for MBM? What's next for mathematics?
So I just dropped a music project called Moms Did. It was basically DJ Khaled a remix, 10 Sober Commandments. It's a good song for people in recovery, highs and lows, for anybody that might be going through something. And my ego is my enemy, because my ego is what got me in the most of my trouble. And the more I silence the ego, the better life gets. But I have some recovery events going on in Worcester, a recovery event in Malden on the 24th, a workshop in conference going on May 19th, a workshop in Family Nurturing Center June 5th, and then I'll be in Southbridge working with the Southbridge Police Department. I'll be doing a presentation for the school from 1 to 2. Then they're going to have my team stay out there for the day, and we're going to put on a presentation for the parents from 6 to 7, because that's really my goal, not just to speak to the youth, but to also speak to the parents. And I have some, whole Juneteenth. I've been blessed to work with you, but I'll do some stuff around Juneteenth. So all that stuff is coming into play. And then I also have the book out in that part, Poetry and Rap Therapy. That's a book that I came out with about 6 months ago, and that's been doing good. And I've been able to give out a lot of copies when I go into the schools, and a lot of people are really learning. But I can also turn that into like a 6-week course as well. So I got some good stuff coming, and music, performances. I'll be in Framingham performing August 1st. There's a big event out there, recovery event, August 1st, and then I'll be opening up for Exit Fame August 14th at the Club Sonia. So that'll be a good experience. So I'm going to be pretty busy.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yes.
How do we follow you?
So I'm Motivated by Mathematics on TikTok, Motivated by Mathematics on YouTube, Motivated by Mathematics on Instagram, and on Mathematics MX Grands on Facebook. And then I also have a website, motivatedbymathematics.com, and I'm getting ready to upgrade my website, but I have merch there and information and email to reach out to me and contact me for anybody that wants to reach out.
Okay. Every time I turn around, you're performing for a different school.
Yes, it's been I just did Arlington 3 times, Taunton. I did this month too, so it's been good to be able to get into these schools. Yes.
So redemption is real.
Mm-hmm.
Change is real. Purpose is real. And sometimes the people who fell the hardest become the strongest voices for hope. Mathematics, thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and your work. And to your daughter, Sky, thank you again for sharing your father with us. This has been another episode of the Cold Brew and Cream podcast, where we never underestimate the power of a second chance. And we grow together, one cup at a time.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Cold Brew and Cream podcast, where storytelling meets personal growth.